Welcome to How We Scaled It for Design Teams, a show that explores the journey through the arduous road of growing a successful design practice. As I mentioned and Diego mentioned earlier, my name's Adam Perlis. I'm the founder and CEO of Academy. We're a UX staffing and recruiting agency, and today I'm joined by Alex Schleifer, former head of design at Airbnb. Welcome, Alex.
It's great to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for coming, Alex. We really appreciate it. So excited to chat with you today. I'm going to give a little bit of a preamble to your story. Alex has an incredible story to tell, really. Despite dropping out of high school, he went on to found his own successful design agency before making his way to Airbnb, where he was tasked with scaling design teams at one of the fastest growing startups in history. And over the next few years, Alex led the design team through some of the company's most significant periods of growth. During his time at Airbnb, Alex faced many challenges, but he was always able to find a way to solve them. From building out a robust design team to establishing a strong design culture, Alex played a critical role in Airbnb's continued success, and today he shares his story and offers valuable insights into what it takes to scale a design team and overcome the obstacles that arise along the way. Alex, I'm so excited to chat today. You and I have known each other for several years now, had many, many conversations. But to give the audience a little bit of context about you and also the design team that you manage, can you share how large the team was actually at Airbnb through its different growth spurts and the teams you managed?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that intro. That's it's quite a trip to hear that. It makes me sound really good. So love it. Yeah. So how large was the team? It was, I was at Airbnb for 6 years. When I joined, the team was 35 people, and it was very much, interface design and UX research team, right? It was very contained. But as it grew, more and more departments got put under the umbrella of design, right? All the way to folks designing the environment, the offices, the localization teams. So we really took a kind of broad brush and look at whatever was the customer experience. And so that grew, and it's hard maybe to tell from the outside, but Airbnb was a pretty complicated company, and there were folks designing interfaces that most people never see, right? For managing taxes, interfaces that governments use, all sorts of things. So at some point, the team was well over 600 people across the globe. And that also included engineers and systems design people and teams in China. So it was a pretty big team, but it's the way we define design was pretty broad, like I said. So we went from 35 to 600 and something. So that was quite a trip.
That's incredible. I mean, I'd imagine, with a company was pretty focused on somewhat of a singular group, which was like helping people find an amazing, apartment or kind of hotel to stay in, and connecting those individuals to then, of course, launching experiences. Like a 600-person design team is quite large. I wonder if there are really any companies outside of like the Googles and the Apples out there that have such a large design team.
Yeah, no, I mean it varies. Varies a lot. It depends. It depends how they're structured. We felt that it was important to have, the art department, as we call the creative teams, the photo teams. We had a pretty active production capacity that was all fell under design, and we felt that, at least at that stage within the company, that everything that touched the customer or like one of our stakeholders could exist under a single umbrella, so that we would build stuff that felt right, so there wasn't kind of these disparate productions going on that didn't feel connected. And so the work and the reviews that we would do to look at where things were in the product were oftentimes just linked to the same review where we would look at an ad and it would be done by very, by a group of people that would talk to each other every day, which I think was really good. So, I'm sure that if you kind of reorganize a lot of these companies, those numbers would start looking similar. We did have, a large team. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I have a little bit of a um, conflicted relationship with the size of teams. I think oftentimes, a lot of design teams are too big, um,
Hmm.
um, depending on the size of the surface, right? So I always try to look at like how big of a design surface is there within the product, and how many people do you really want to put on that. That's one thing, and also, there were changes in technologies and things like that required more or less designers, right? In the beginning where we didn't have things like Figma. Uh, you need a lot more production designers. But then Figma kind of streamlines some of those processes, I would say.
Yep.
And also, but at the same time, as you have more platforms, Android, iOS, iPad, depending on how many platforms you want to, at some point we had an Apple TV app. Yeah, at some point you kind of need teams to manage a lot of these things, so the teams can scale. Um, but it's important to look at scale as just not something you have to reach, but like do it very intentionally. And I think the last 10 years in Silicon Valley, there's been a lot of scaling up without a lot of intention at times. So
Yeah.
so
A-
just a caveat.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, making sure you're scaling at the right times to the right size of team that meets kind of the opportunity your company has at that moment is really, really important. And as like you, in particular, at your role at Airbnb, and I'm sure you've dealt with this in many of the companies that you've worked with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, how did you know when the right moments to scale were? You guys were aggressively growing, and what was maybe the smallest team you had, and then when you first maybe started, and then what was the next period of growth that you went to from there, and then so on and so forth.
Well, maybe, I think it would be. I would love to talk about also the times where I didn't get this right, and I can tell you
Sure. I
when
think
I
that would be
got
even
this right.
better.
So, I mean, I think it's pretty easy, especially in a boom cycle, to get a lot of budget and a lot of and nearly like this kind of this, you know, arms race, for a better term, to hire people, right? So all of a sudden you go to South by Southwest and oh, am I frozen?
I can see you,
All right,
or you
sorry.
are. Your audio is going, but now you are frozen from a video
Yeah,
standpoint.
the video will be fine once we upload it. I'm very sorry if my I'm in deep in Sonoma, wine country over a Starlink. So blame Elon for many things, but including that. Um, I I let me talk about some of the things I got wrong, because I think, like I said, I think in a boom cycle you get a lot of you get people get a lot of incentives to hire a lot of people, all the way down to, and I'm not saying this is what happened at Airbnb, but hearing from the people that were working in the industry, VCs tracking success by how many people you hired, right? Which is ironic because now they're tracking it by how many people companies fire. So it depends. Or like feeling that there's this arms race, and you go to South by Southwest and Facebook has this 3-story container setup with live DJs trying to hire everyone, and you're like, oh crap, if we don't hire, nobody's going to work for us. um, and so there was this really kind of like a lot of activity around that, and it kind of forced you to hire people. And I think a lot of times, sometimes hire people without a clear role in mind for where they would sit, and thinking of people like, well, we need a bench of people to just be there in case the work load becomes higher. And I think you should always watch out for that, because we might be more of a bust cycle now, but this is a boom and bust industry, and things will change. And so just to keep that clear headedness in the back of your mind. But personally, where I think I made mistakes is, um, as the team grows, you need more layers. As more layers grow, you create more and more structures. So you start having more managers, and so you start hiring people as managers, and you have less individual contributors within the team, making as part of the makeup of the team, and that creates this tension where a lot of the individual contributors feel like they had to become managers to progress their careers. You can create a culture of that. That becomes, I think, that is something that I wish I had. Um, that I wish I had gotten ahead of, even though we did a lot of work to remedy that, creating a very clear path for individual contributors to become successful. I think getting ahead of that is important, because what you don't want to get into is all your individual contributors feel like they have to become managers, so then you have to hire more individual contributors, and it creates kind of this kind of big hierarchy of people. So I would do less of that, but there was a lot of growth that happened around that, I would say. And then the organization became much more complicated. The other one is just as depending on how the company is organized, and Airbnb, like most companies, the organization shifted from being more division based to more of a hub and spoke, to more of a kind of functionally organized. And depending on those cycles, you have different demands from different groups within the companies. So there would be, PMs that would come in with a budget, with a list of things that they were doing, and say, we need 4 designers for this team. And you're getting 400 requests like this a year, right? That you have to, and everything looks good on the document, but how long are those designers going to be busy for? How much continuous development is going into this feature, and how engaging is that feature going to be to work on 6 months down the line? So I think a lot of that is just oftentimes the difficult conversation of having to ask a product manager to slow down, or maybe work with another team, or maybe work with a more centralized team. Because at the end of the day, if you give somebody an authority over a part of the product, they want their own team, and so you start kind of building all these splintering teams, and that also kind of can artificially increase the size of the team in a way that feels I think not productive in the long term. Thankfully, there was a lot going on at Airbnb, so we mostly, found stuff for people to do. But I would say that was always a concern. Um, but the thing that really kind of made the teams grow for us was a clear understanding that we wanted to build, we wanted to build an incredible web experience, an incredible mobile experience, and even have a tablet experience. So we weren't just focusing on one path. We really wanted to be everywhere, and that requires a little bit of a larger team, I think, to maintain that. And then just how global we were, and also how much attention we wanted to put into every single part of the product, so that the product would be constantly improving and getting better. So we wanted to always be ahead of the game. So that just told us that we needed to have a really great team, and a team of a certain scale, to allow for that to happen. And then, on top of that, I think we did have a very active production design team. Lots of art assets, lots of photography, lots of stuff like that, and that also increased that scale. And look, I came from an ideology of working with tiny teams, right? So that was a bit of a stretch for me. But it became apparent, especially as we were in hyper growth, in those first 2 years, that we just needed more people.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like, one of the key learnings that you had, as a manager and a team leader helping grow this organization was partially expectation setting from the very beginning, and being super clear and transparent with people about roles, responsibilities, growth plans. I'd imagine part of that was developing very clear career ladders,
Mm.
also being clear with people in the interview process of what to expect, and then eventually you got into hiring and retention and all those other things, which kind of flowed from the very beginning of that process. So I want to talk a little bit about the fundamental areas of growth. And they're really, foundationally recruiting, hiring, retention, culture, career
Yeah.
growth,
Yeah.
mentorship, company success, and team output. And we're going to start with recruiting. Tell me, like, how do you approach finding and attracting top talent from your team, and how have you managed to get around any problems in that process?
I it was, I don't think the process remained, static for any longer than a month. You know, um, I think that in developing a team and kind of growing that scale, I think that in the beginning it really starts as recruiting is the real challenge. Um, and so we built up a great recruiting team, like I think one of the best in the industry, and also we really engaged a lot of the people in the team to become folks that would like kind of culturally represent the organization, to say like, hey, working here, this is what working here is like. And we had a very clear sets of standards as to who we wanted to bring into the organization. And um, part of the discomfort, I think, for me was that I always felt that the recruiting process was too fast. Like that like you can't really get a sense of someone by just looking at their LinkedIn profile and portfolio. And that's like controversial because people definitely didn't want to do homework. And 9 out of 10 people you were talking to had some sort of exploding offer from Google, and you said, well, we have a week to make that decision. And you don't like, you're like, yeah, well, that we can't make that decision then, because there's a lot, the there's not like it's a complex job. Every company works differently. It's not a particularly super easy to define um, set of demands that you have. And we really wanted to get the sense of how people worked and how they were thinking about certain problems. So we were pushing for a very tactile um, interview process, which was tough, right? Which was tough when,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna keep mentioning Google and Facebook is because they're big enough and they can take the criticism. Like it's fine, but like
Hmm.
literally, it felt like there were companies going like, having signing bonuses and offers ready with after a couple of hours, right? And that was difficult to compete against, a lot of times. But I think at the same time there was like a great filtering um, process. And every company that I advise now, I say like, you know, spend 3 times the time hiring one person rather than hiring 3 people. Like just really like make sure that you're hiring the right person. Um, because hiring the wrong people is not going to work. And the wrong people doesn't mean like it's purely based on a skill set. It's like their interest. Like somebody's going to wake up every morning and be excited to work on this stuff. It doesn't work for everyone. You kind of need a little bit of time to do that. And the hardest ones were always like the VP and director and executive level, who had no time for this stuff. Didn't want to kind of sit down and talk along a whiteboard and start thinking about that, because they were like, um, uh, to be honest, I think a lot of people thought it was beneath them to do that. And because we worked where everybody at Airbnb was meant to be craft focused, including like very senior people, our process was a lot more tactile. You know, um,
Mm.
you know, and it started with my interview process. It took me 4 months. It was a pretty
Wow.
intense
Yeah.
intense process. Not that I think that's the right length. I just think
Yeah.
that's you just want to hire the right people. I don't know if I kind of got away from your original question, but
No,
that was that
this is
was
great. I think that first of all, a 1 month interview process is actually quite fast in the world of interviewing. I myself have also been through 3, even 6 month interview processes at some of those companies that you mentioned, and I'm sure many
and it's
people in
gotten
this room have also.
yeah, and it's gotten a little bit more. It's changed over time, right? I think 5 years ago things were quite different, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I
But
think the takeaway. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, I mean, I think where but the process started like, okay, how do we in the beginning it was like, how do we scale a team from 0 to 5, right? And that's its own challenge, right? Because you get the pressure to hire really quickly, so you might be not doing the right hires, as you do that. So you should watch that first phase, which is just like building up the team. You want to bring people on that are senior enough to take on some work, um, and but not too junior, so they don't need so much oversight. So building that kind of first 0 to 1 team, and it could be like a startup, but it could also be a team within the organization that needs staffing, right? Always
Right.
doing that. But then the issue quickly becomes like hiring senior leadership, which is like 95% of the calls that I get today for help is, how do we hire a senior person?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you hear about that a lot. And so that became a completely different challenge, because honestly, I think that the pool of people is all over the place, from people who are tired to manage people to people who never want to touch the design again. And you're like, and people in
Yep.
between. So it's hard to find what type of person you want for that company. So that was the kind of the
Yeah.
transition. Like the beginning for me was building 0 to 1. By the end, I was hiring leadership, and it was just a completely different set of challenges over time.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's a really critical point, right? Where, depending on the stage of company you're in, you're going to have different needs. And one of the things I've heard a lot from a lot of other design leaders is hire, if you can, hire the managers first, right? Don't try to hire junior folks unless you're the direct manager, right? You're a small enough
yeah,
team that you're
yeah,
managing these people individually.
yeah,
But if your team is scaling, hire the managers first, and then also focus deeply on the interview process, and making sure you nail it right, so that you can train them to hire also the right
yeah,
people.
yeah.
So train the managers. That's like one of the big lessons I've heard.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, this is the way I'm calibrated, so I know a bunch of people will disagree with that. I would I would hire them managers also that can be hands on and do work, right? Like you kind of want people to cover gaps, right? If there's somebody not doing it, right? And as a team grows,
Yep.
fine, you can step away, you can assign yourself different tasks. But to
Mm,
me, the way I looked at stuff is always like this kind of kitchen mentality, right? Like the chef can cut the carrots if the person cutting the carrots is not hired yet. Like so you
right.
kind of, especially when you're in a startup, like don't hire pure managers. Like also, if you're somebody who thinks you're just a pure manager, just make sure that you still maintain a kind of base set of skills that allows you to be productive in a company. There's questions coming in through chat. Do you want, are we here to answer them? Because there's a press.
Yeah. So we're gonna have
Do
time
that
for
at the
Q
end.
and A
Great,
yeah, at the end. But so
great,
chat, keep your questions in there. Diego's monitoring. He'll make sure that we pull those up. But
great,
actually some of them are relevant, and I'll be kind of drumming them up anyways. So
great.
one of the things I wanted to kind of just harp on in the recruiting function, because it's not it's definitely about developing the interview process and kind of expectation setting, career ladders. But another important part of it is not just training your own team, but it's also creating great relationships with your recruiting partners, right? The
Mm-hmm.
people who are out there sourcing people, maybe taking phone screens, getting people in the door and putting them on your desk, so that you're freed up to, manage the team and move things forward.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what it was like establishing that at a place like Airbnb?
Yeah, I think the recruiting partners were um, critical in the relationship we built with them, and I'm pretty proud of how close they felt to the team, and we really took them as a part of the team. Considered them as a part of the team, so they would be kind of in team meetings, and I would also like have regular chats with them, just get them connected to the work that was going on, because I said it's important to see how things work here. Because I was very you don't want your recruiters to work like a sales team, which is like go sales that meet that quota, but you want them to understand like it's important that you set expectations, because there's a lot of people who are not going to like the way we work here, and a lot of people are going to love it, and you need to like kind of be able to start intuiting that from when you meet people, because you're the first person they're going to meet oftentimes. And so it was important for us to build that and make them feel like a real part of the team, and and also like make them feel proud for the work that they did beyond just that one hire, right? Like I said, I don't want this to be like a sales team. I want like, look at this team you've built, right? You're
Yeah.
responsible for this, um, and also like be aware of retention, right? Okay, we hired this person, they bounced off after a month. What can we learn from it? So having this kind of much more kind of longer term look at the team we were building, and having a really clear understanding of like my, it was nearly more important for the recruiters to understand my philosophy on things than once where people were in the team, because once where people in the team, they would do what they needed to do. So that's super
Right.
important, I think.
Did you
Yeah.
spend time having to train them on anything, or were they already pretty well equipped to understand the field of product design and UX?
You took time to train. I think a lot of people were um, pretty good. I think Airbnb attracted, you know, folks that were already interested in design, and so you know, lots of very smart people. I think the part where you kind of train is more like a specific philosophy as to how we work. Like we're much
Yeah.
more hands on. Like I don't want, you know, like I'm gonna ask a VP to open Figma and look at a design together. Maybe not create one, but just like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, what are let's talk about, I don't know, grids. Um, but uh, but in general, just like making sure that they're like passionate about what we're building, and so it was
Yeah.
a lot of training around that, and
Mhm.
hopefully showing recruiters how you can spot specific kind of traits.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And, we talked a little bit before about the importance of developing an interview process. But for the audience, to know, like, how did you guys like build an interview process? What was it like? What were the steps involved? And like, how did you get it down to a month?
Well, we didn't get it down to a month always, like honestly, like, and I think
Mm,
our interview process changed so much over the years. Um, and a lot of it was like you don't exist in a vacuum, so you kind of have to adapt to the conditions of the market outside, right? And you know, like it or not, you know, you kind of, there's a few companies that could just say this is how we do it and what, you know, um, and but I think that you know, you know, Airbnb had like interviewees that would be from outside the design team. That was always important. So like either
mm,
stakeholders or other kind of more cultural interviews. Uh, we would try to match. We would try to be clear and like tell interviewees that they should also set expectations. This is the time to make somebody change their mind if they've just seen us from the outside and think like, oh, this is a such a magical place to work. Look at these wonderful offices, and you know, look at all these articles that are written about it. But just make sure that you clarify the you know, the reality of working there. What's difficult, what's not, what's to like, what's not. Um,
hmm
so our process was really kind of like very individually based, and we would do that, and then we would try all sorts of different configuration of design exercises and or frameworks where we'd bring people in a room in some sort of group setting and do have a conversation about a topic either on the product or not. We would try like not to uh, give people a challenge that felt like unfair because they don't have the context. You know, I think sometimes company do like, how would you solve this thing? Well, I don't know. I haven't thought about like 2 months for you guys, so it's unfair to ask me. So we would try to pick like neutral things, um, or even ask people to pick something that they'd been thinking about and say, hey, can you run us through your thinking about that? Um,
mm,
and that's how we would do it. It would be and then we would talk about it. That
Yeah.
was it, you know. Yeah,
And in
yeah.
terms of those design exercises, that's obviously been somewhat of a controversial topic, over the past, I don't know, a few years, I'd say. Were they mostly collaborative exercises that were done like in the interview process, or were those like take home exercises that people would work on and then represent back to the teams?
We tried both. Honestly, like depends on the on when the time was. I think I hate the concept of homework, honestly, and just because people have busy lives. So if you're going to bring them in for a couple of hours, why don't we do it there? But at the same time, we would ask people if they preferred like more time to think about it, because you don't want to
Sure.
force people to think like on their feet. Uh,
Yep.
but like Airbnb was very much an on your feet type company where things moved quickly, and a lot of the design conversations were critiques, right? So the founders came from RISD, and there's like this idea of a crit, like, hey, tell me why this sucks. Da 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 da. It's like, okay, well, let me defend it. And so kind of getting that's like a little bit of a taste of what that sparring could look like. Um,
Mm.
but being fully aware that this person hadn't met anyone before that meeting, so it's like, it's a little bit uncomfortable. So we would be very nice about it, I think.
Yeah.
But we tried, like, I think homework is always a problem unless people prefer. So what I like to do is like say, hey, we're going to have some sort of design exercise and give some choices. um yeah, so that's that.
Awesome. And in terms of like, we talked a little bit about how career ladders are a great way to set up expectations for the people you're hiring,
Mm-hmm,
and then also throughout their kind of career in your company that you happen to be working in, and
mm-hmm.
that kind of leads me to thinking about retention. How do you make sure that the people that you've hired stay with you and continue to enjoy and be passionate about the work that they're doing there?
Mm. That, yeah, the recruiting challenge quickly goes into retention, and that's why I just like as a bridge from one topic to another. I think it's important for recruiters to feel accountable for retention. I think it's not just getting
Hmm.
people through the door; it's keeping people in. However, I will say that retention issues are. Um, and look, a natural kind of transition of people around is actually healthy. I was never upset when somebody said that they were going to leave and try something new. Like if it was for the right reasons, like that's great. And But to me, maybe controversial, but I think retention is uh, usually when the work is not interesting, or
Yeah.
or when the work might be interesting, but doing it is so challenging that it doesn't feel worth it. Like it's not like, I mean, I think there's a lot of programs that are built around retention, around culture, around things like that. But in general, I think people came here to work and for and move their careers forward, and they're not gonna leave because um, you know there's things missing in the cafeteria, or the parties aren't fun, or whatever. I mean, I think these
Right.
are important if you're hiring young people, that you give them some sort of social structure, because it helps them meet friends and all that stuff. That's great. But I think in most cases, especially in design, it's like, is it interesting? Um, and is the environment like, not is the environment so is the work interesting, and is the environment that I'm within like making that work kind of fun to do? And that could be like a
Yeah.
toxic environment, or shitty manager, or like a completely like lack of decision making, like. So for me, the thing is like, I think is it's like designers that leave companies, if you dig into it, it's like, well, I didn't really have a surface area I owned. Like, I was kind of removing that button left and then moving it back to the right, or kind of this one. This other one is like, well, we don't seem to have a clear direction. Like nobody seems to be making decisions, so I'm idle a lot of the time, or I'm doing
Hmm.
work that feels idle, even though I make myself busy. Nothing actually gets released. Um, and so to me, like, all of these issues uh all of these issues like end up because you have overhired, so you don't have enough people, or you don't have the right leadership that makes decisions and inspires people to do great work. And so these two kind of tensions are usually uh part of that. Or it's not right, and they find another job and they leave, and that's fine, right? That's fine. But I think a lot of time it's just like, in tech specifically, like the lack of decision making. It's like, just make a call, go move forward. And so instead we kind of have a tendency to, and that certainly happened at Airbnb too, but um, like, so you end up having like 30 meetings where everybody has an opinion, nobody makes a call, or you kind of offload all the decision making to some experiment so that the data can make the decision for you. And at the end of the day, that like saps the energy out of the process. And I think people leave that. On the extreme end is like a terrible person manages you, right? Like you
Right.
never want that. You could be working at McDonald's or in an oil company or be a fighter pilot. You don't want that, right? So
Yeah.
never deal with that. But structurally, I think it's usually like a structure where decisions aren't made, where too many people are trying to solve the same problem, stepping on each other's toes, and therefore you don't see yourself getting better or building something that feels meaningful to you. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the things I'm hearing are really centered around the people that you work with and your purpose in the organization and finding those two things. And if those things aren't present, that's why people leave. It's not because of the fancy coffee in the cafeteria or the fun parties.
No.
It's giving people purpose and great culture. And that actually kind of leads me into the next
Well, I
topic,
have
which
maybe
is sure, go
sorry,
ahead.
I have maybe one thing to add that I think I forgot because that's maybe the.
Hmm.
I do think that a lot of people that I've talked to that are happy and excited about their work is because they felt that they were working alongside or for uh, somebody who was inspiring them to become better. And those are like and so, so it's like mentorship through leadership, right? Where you're saying like, oh, this like their vision was very clear. I didn't always agree with it, but it always gave us a path and it pushed me to do better. And that really helps. Like you have this person that you kind of get that inspires you and helps you make decisions and helps you do things that you might have not tried were you on your own. And I think inspirational leadership is important, which is why I also talk about like why I think that chef kitchen analogy, which is not perfect, but I think like having somebody that like understands the different areas of work and can be kind of somebody that you admire, that you work for, like try to find that. Honestly, like that's what I always enjoyed. And what I've talking to young designers coming up is like that's what they seek. And so try to be an inspirational leader if you can. Whatever. I don't think leadership is saying, oh, I'll step away and I'll let you do your thing, because like, hey, you've done this for 20 years. Have you seen something that I haven't seen? Like, tell me your
Yeah.
stories. I think you should seek that out. But that's just something I forgot to mention. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. And actually, it's a really important part of the topic. One of the things that we used to do at AKQA is we had kind of like a buddy program where you would have like a mentor that would be outside of your department specifically, but maybe like still in like the same discipline, but just not in the
Mhm.
same group as yours. And you could kind of talk to them about anything and just tell them how things are going and
Mhm.
they'll help you with your career growth and all those kind of things, more like a career coach than anything else. Was that something like a buddy program or a mentorship program? Did you guys have anything like that within Airbnb, or it sounded like maybe you did?
Yeah, we did we once again, like hyper growth companies kind of I kind of compared them to a lizard. Like they outgrow their skin all the time, and so all the systems you built like kind of go fly out the window. But we had various
Mm,
versions of mentorship programs. It's important to have like so we definitely had a buddy program. Like culturally we had mentorship programs. We would try to get you know folks working alongside other folks that could kind of teach them stuff. We would also like it was really great when we having interns or bringing folks in like that and giving younger designers the ability to be themselves a mentor to somebody who's just starting out. So I would say like try to do that either at a team level or one-to-one individual level. You can't always do it at the same scale because you don't the teams are all over the place in sizes. So Yeah, mentorship is great. Also, seeking out mentors outside of the organization, just like promoting that behavior, I think is great. Uh, and and also, yeah, highlighting people within the organization that might really benefit a lot from mentorship, and to give them access to things and bring them into meetings, that even just as like um, as a way to kind of like immerse people into kind of a process that they might have not been used to. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't like, it kept changing, so I don't have like here the ABCs of how we did it, but there was always some sort of program about creating that. I love the idea conceptually, which is something I never got to do, of like an apprenticeship program where you
Mm,
kind of bring people in to learn, like um, and really work alongside like craft and learning these things. And as you're doing that, you also apply yourself. And I know internships are a little bit like that, but apprenticeship feels much more structured around like, hey, there's a person and you're their apprentice, and you kind of make that move forward. I never got figured out how to really make that work
yeah. I
properly.
I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I wish that more companies would consider that, because I think that junior designers generally have a tougher time breaking into the industry, and there needs to be a little bit more of that happening.
You need experience, like that's the whole thing. Like it's hard, like there's no direct path, right? And the more experience you have, the more stuff you have to show, the more things you've solved, the better you are at it. So bring them in
Yeah,
and give them a bunch of experience. Yeah, sure. you know
yeah,
and
yeah,
also like make sure that it's
absolutely.
like there's some reciprocity there, like that the person that's
Right.
the apprentice like is actually like providing some value as well, because they're bringing in work and stuff like that. If you can create a structure like that, then it would be exciting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, we've covered a lot of, kind of the fundamental areas of growth. One question I was asked to ask you from a member from LinkedIn was a story about the Muppets. Do you have some story about the Muppets? Is that
The
ringing any
Muppets.
bells for you?
Yeah, no, I think we had I think yeah, talking about like mentors or people that inspire you. I always thought like uh um you know that it was interesting to look at mentors. A lot of the people that we admire are oftentimes problematic, right, over time. But I always loved talking about Jim Henson, because Jim Henson for me was like somebody who was like hugely creative. But if you look at a lot of the people that worked on things like Fraggle Rock or the Muppets, they were like, this was the best time of my career. Like this felt like working with Jim was, and not because Jim was a genius and we all felt like idiots. It's because Jim made us all feel like we could work within an environment and be like, the best we could be. And I always said like, oh, I always want to try to aspire to make somebody's like time on my team to be the best time of their career, right? Like I don't know if that will be the case, but you should always aim for that. And I think Jim Henson had qualities that got people to do amazing things and work hard, but feel like they were doing it out of choice rather than out of fear. And I think that's great. Like, how can you build a work ethic that's built around passion? Also, apparently, you never know, but apparently he wasn't an asshole, which you can't say about a lot of the other people we admire. So that's not
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. Absolutely. Well,
Uh,
that's a beautiful way to kind of wrap this conversation up. I want to get a chance to turn to the audience. I believe actually we have a little bit of a live call-in feature that I'd love to test out. If you do have
Ooh,
a question,
ambitious.
I can, yeah, we can try it out. If it doesn't work, it won't work. But please, if somebody from the audience wants to try finding the button, whoever finds it first gets asked the first question. It's probably on the bottom somewhere.
Yeah. There are other. Also, I'm just open the chat, and there's a bunch of questions on the chat. Exciting.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll give it another 10 seconds. If nobody can figure it out, that's okay. I'll ask one of these questions that I
It's a
see
good.
here in the
That's
chat.
a good design challenge right there.
Yeah, yeah. Let's
Oh,
see if
apparently
Riverside can figure this out.
there's no call-in option on the app, so maybe people are using the mobile app. versus the desktop environment.
Oh, that could be true. That could be
Mm.
true. Okay, well, in that case, I am going to scroll up here. I did see a question from Brad. It's not bad. That someone had actually noted that they liked the question. So I'm going to read it. It says, "What should be in place, systems, processes, etc., that is critical to attracting, onboarding?" I'm sorry, people keep chatting and it went away. I'll start it over. What should be in place, systems, processes, etc., that is critical to attracting, onboarding, and scaling? I apologize, guys. I'm gonna just copy this question and move it into a new place because the chat keeps moving. Just a moment.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay. What should be in place, systems, processes, etc., that is critical to attracting, onboarding, and scaling teams, as well as achieving the quality and consistency of UX you clearly accomplished?
Um, well, I think the first thing, just to be honest, it is always a messy process to get things to look right on the other side. So I don't think there's any systems that you can have in place that make this great. Our process at Airbnb was really based on a lot of um, workshops and design crits and reviews, like where we would be in the room and just talking about the design, right, and looking at the thing, right. That was important. It wasn't just a meeting about what we were going to build. Like those, we would try to make them as quick as possible, but then as we were building, a lot of check-ins, and that could have been um, kind of why some of these things came out the way they did. That being said, I think what you need in place is just to understand, like I said, I talk about surface area a lot. It's very easy to hire someone without them having a clear surface area to work on. And sometimes we get a little bit confused because when you're building an app, the engineering component of it can go very deep. There's a lot of different layers of engineering that you can put, like from the UI layer, but all the way to the server uptime and the improvements you can do. So you can build a pretty deep engineering team, but designers really handle a lot of kind of the human computer interface surface, right? Which is actually like a finite set of, to to simplify it, a finite set of screens and patterns. And at some point, you need to look at like how many of those do we have to designers, because I think it's important for people to work on something engaging and then that they can keep trying to improve. And sometimes uh, you might hire someone, you don't have a clear sense of what they're going to be working on. It doesn't have to be forever, but I think the first 100 days are important. That person lands. What are they doing for the first 100 days? Because I do really believe that people get the most engagement out of the work that they do. Like everything else is great and a bonus, but if they do work that they feel is making them better, is making them think, is giving them a challenge, is leading towards something interesting. So like make sure that you have those 100 days like of work filled, and whether or not there's like systems in place, or some people have design systems that are really organized. Some people, and we had a whole thing where people would come in and they would train and stuff like that. Those are great, but they come like way later. Like those are bonuses. The most important thing is to know, like, all right, welcome, here's who you're going to work with, here's what you're going to work on, here's a goal, here's what we're doing. That's by far the most useful thing to do, and those first 100 days are critical.
Awesome. I've got a live call in from Brandon. I'm going to accept this and let's see how this
Oh,
goes.
great.
Um, Essentially, my question, as I posted, thank you so much, Alex and Adam, for putting this together. It's great. And Eric just asked an amazing question, so I want to get to that one too. But I'm at an agency. I'm not in-house at a large organization. So my question is, as you scaled for your first 5, then your next 500, it seemed like it was tied to the growth of the company as a whole. Do you think that there are parallels for agencies when we're doing consulting work and we're not embedded inside of an organization, or are they just super radically different? I'm trying to scale and grow my team right now, and it seems to be directly tied to the amount of work coming in. But I'm curious if there are other factors at play that parallel between in-house and agency work.
Yeah, I mean, I think I started my career in an agency. Partially it's because nobody was hiring designers back then, so I made, I made my own company. I think agencies suffer a little bit from the finite nature of the projects, so there is no maintenance cycle. Like technically, in a traditional tech company, any feature you build is going to be maintained over time. If you're not maintaining it, you're sunsetting it, you're turning it off at some point. And so that gives a lot of room for more junior folks to come in and take over maybe the maintenance, or like kind of like iterative improvements of certain products. So it gives like a lot of longevity to the team. And because agencies customer base ebbs and flows, and there's different cycles, like it's a lot harder to build, to be how do I say, like to kind of predict what scale the team's going to be at. But I do think I prefer functionally organized organization. I prefer centralized groups of people that work together, because I think you all benefit from each other. And the one thing I like about agencies sometimes is that you have a central group of people, and then you can assign individuals to different projects, but in the end they kind of come back together, and you can build a lot of flexibility into that. So what I think, the best way to grow an agency is to have like a tighter group of like really strong individuals that like working on a lot of different stuff, that can then kind of go and tackle these different challenges, because that they're finite, and they're gonna last 3, 6, 9 months. And so with that, like I would actually say that like I like organizing companies more like agencies, where you have folks that can move into a project at the right time, and then move back to a central structure, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Brandon. I'm going to move to Eric as one of the last questions. I'm going to just boot you from the stream for a second. All right. Eric, I don't know if you have the live call-in feature, but feel free to call in. If not, I can read your question. All right. I'll read it unless you chime in. Eric had asked, got +1 in the channel as well. How did design and product work together at Airbnb? What was the relationship like?
Well, at Airbnb, we were trying to make sure that people worked with this kind of first team mindset. Like my team wasn't the design team. My team was the executive team, and that included the engineering partner and the marketing partner and the product manager. It's like Joe Zade at the time, and our CEO. Like we were kind of working as a team, and then we all had a group of people that worked for us, and we try to apply that to everyone. So I think, for me, like that's always just a nice framing. Say, hey, you're design manager on this team. Your team is actually the person that sits next to you. Like you have a group of people that, and so not to create these. I like functionally organized, but not like functionally tribal. If that makes sense. Like because at the end of the day, you're kind of working together. So it went really well, I think. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you structure the company. You can go this far by structuring the company a certain way, et cetera. There's two things that absolutely need to be done: is like understanding who makes decisions, right? And what type of decisions, creating an environment for you to butt heads, right? Like me and our head of product, like we had like a very healthy amount of like conversations and arguments, because we allowed ourselves to do that would hopefully end up in decisions being made. Because to me, like the thing I'm the most allergic to is like when a decision is not made. Like most times you get 10 choices. 5 of them are correct, 5 of them are wrong. Just pick one of the 5 correct ones and move forward, because there's an entire team waiting. And so that's what we would try to do. That being said, just like be very aware, PMs, like designers, but PMs will come from different companies and operate completely differently with a completely set of expectations. So there were rooms of PMs. They might have been from Amazon, maybe not, maybe from other companies, where they would just not listen to their design partner. Like it was not interesting to them to have that conversation, right? And they would come in from all different types of organizations that had just different ways of doing things. that we needed to have a conversation about. And I think that's why I would say, like, if you're ever stuck on anything, escalate. You're stuck for 24 hours on anything with your PM partner, your engineering partner, or whoever, escalate immediately. Because I'm not going to come in and like yell at anyone. That's not how it's going to work. But I'm just going to explain, like, see where the tension lies. Because a lot of the times that's kind of this thing where, like somebody's really passionate about something and somebody's passionate about another thing, and they're trying to make it work and it doesn't work. So that's why I think leadership can step in. So if you're stuck, it could be 48 hours, whatever you feel like, just make sure that, because PMs are going to be from all over the place and they're going to behave in all sorts of different ways. Oh, what I mean by escalate, I just saw the message pop up. You escalate upwards. So like in this case, like, if you feel, I actually at some point told that in all hands, if anybody feels like you're waiting on an answer, you can't make a decision, bring it up to me, or bring it up to your manager, right? And if you kind of get into that thing, because the worst thing in companies is when we don't make decisions as leaders. That's the worst thing to do. It's okay to make the wrong decision sometimes, but like, it's this lack of decision, or changing a mind, or then having a meeting with 30 people. And you know what? Like, what happens a lot is that leaders like offload the decisions to the people on their team, which I also think sometimes is unfair. What if people get paralyzed by, what if it's wrong? We're going to spend a lot of money. We're going to lose a lot of money. So just be ready to make decisions. And if you feel like you're owed a decision, escalate. And that's what the job's for.
So I just wanted to just chime in here because we got to wrap up. But first of all, Alex, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you as always, and learning about your journey at Airbnb and throughout your career. I think your advice was incredible. For those of you guys who did have questions, I want to make sure that a lot of these get answered. So I think a really great forum to do that is we're going to post a recording of this video onto LinkedIn, both through Academy's channels as well as through the Design Leadership Forum channels. When we write the post, feel free to write comments under the video and or put it on YouTube, either one, any place. And we'll do our best. Actually, likely LinkedIn will be the best place so that Alex will have easier access to answer the questions. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer a few more questions for you guys. And then Alex, any things you want to make the audience aware of about things you're up to today that they should know about?
I hadn't thought about it. I mean, also, feel free to reach out on Twitter. I still use Twitter at Alexoid, but I'm at Alexoid also, and I'm on posts that like delightful design only Twitter. But yeah, I'm also very excited that I'm recording a weekly podcast called People versus Algorithms about patterns in media, and I think it's really important now because it's talking about media, the internet, advertising, but also the impact that AI is having on all this. And I think that anyone in our industry should be paying attention to that. And I'm just about to hop into a recording for that. So checking that out would be great. And then in anywhere between 2 to 12 years, I will be launching 2 video games. So we'll talk about that then, because video games take a long time.
That is very, very cool. We actually just hosted a story or a panel discussion about how AI is impacting the design industry, actually through the Design Leadership Forum on Friday. So definitely very cool that you have a podcast focused on this very important topic of how AI is impacting media. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. If anybody wants to get in touch with myself, you guys can always add me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat about any of these topics as it relates to growing your design teams. Of course, I speak to many leaders like Alex. I have a lot of good best practices that I've personally learned along the way. And Alex, is there any way that people can follow you? I think you had mentioned Twitter is probably the best place to kind of follow some of your dialogue.
Yeah, or Alex at unient.com, UNIENT, that's for universalentities.com, or via the website. That's great.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.